The United States and Iran begin talks in Oman as fears of a full military confrontation continue to grow. Senior officials from both sides meet in Muscat, marking the first direct engagement between Washington and Tehran since last year's Israel-Iran war. U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are in for the meeting. And in the latest development, the U.S. has urged its citizens to leave Iran immediately as tensions with Tehran reached a critical point ahead of high-stakes talks. Meanwhile, Iran said it will defend itself against any excessive demands or adventurism by the U.S., while also striking a diplomatic tone. Iran enters diplomacy with open eyes and a steady memory of the past year. We engage in good faith and stand firm on our rights. And just hours before the talks, Iran sent a clear military message. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps released video footage of a test launch of its Khorramshahr 4 ballistic missile, saying the weapon was fired from an underground base. With U.S. military assets moving into positions across West Asia, President Trump has issued a direct warning to Iran's top leadership. On Wednesday, Trump said that diplomacy is being backed by force. I would say he should be very worried. Yeah, he should be. As you know, they're negotiating with us. They were thinking about starting a new site in a different part of the country. We found out about it. I said, "You do that, we're going to do very bad things to you." Well, Iran, for its part, also issued sharp warnings of retaliation, saying any attack would be met with force, including strikes on American bases in the Middle East and on Israel. And questions over the location and scope of the discussions had raised doubts as Iran requested a last-minute shift from Istanbul to Muscat. Meeting in Oman, however, is not without precedent. The Gulf nation has a long history of acting as an intermediary between the U.S. and Iran. Oman, along with Italy, hosted last year's round of negotiations. Tehran also insisted the meeting be limited strictly to Iranian and American officials. The Iranian delegation is led by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who recently said Iran's armed forces had their fingers on the trigger. Now, at the heart of the standoff between Iran and the United States is uranium enrichment. Washington, along with other Western allies and Israel, believes Iran is seeking the capability to build a nuclear weapon, a claim Iran strongly denies, insisting that its program is purely for peaceful purposes. Diplomacy moving forward. The president has obviously been quite clear in his demands of the Iranian regime. Zero nuclear capability is something he's been very explicit about. And he wants to see if a deal can be struck. And while these negotiations are taking place, I would remind the Iranian regime that the president has many options at his disposal. Aside from diplomacy as the commander-in-chief of the most powerful military in the history of the world, another key issue is Iran's stockpile of more than 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. President Trump is demanding a complete halt to enrichment. Iran says it has no intentions of militarizing its program and claims it could dilute its enriched uranium, but only if sanctions are lifted in return. The U.S. also wants to discuss Iran's ballistic missile program and human rights violations. But Tehran says this is a red line and that it violates its sovereignty and goes beyond the scope of nuclear negotiations. For Tehran, these talks may represent an opportunity to avoid U.S. military action and secure sanctions relief. For Washington, they could provide an exit ramp from escalating military threats across West Asia. Meanwhile, regional mediators including Egypt, Turkey, and Qatar hope these discussions can de-escalate tensions as global attention focuses on the U.S.-Iran talks. Yesterday, Germany issued a stark warning about the risks ahead. Yes, I saw this tweet. I can only say that it is evidently an expression of great nervousness and uncertainty. Concern about a military escalation in the region is great. So the talks will be intensified in the coming hours. There will also be envoys from the U.S. government, the U.S. president traveling in the region. And China today said it supports Iran defending its interests and opposes what it calls bullying from the Trump administration. And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also spoke about Iran during a closed session. Netanyahu said conditions were building towards what he described as a critical point that could potentially lead to the collapse of Iran's ruling system. Iran has also released a detailed war scenario outlining how it would respond to a conflict with the United States. Reports suggest that the document envisions a rapid Iranian response involving missile barges against U.S. bases in the region, the activation of proxy groups, cyber operations, and disruption to global energy flows. The talks come against the backdrop of mass protests in Iran, where security forces launched a deadly crackdown. The demonstrations were triggered by a deepening economic crisis. With deep divisions still in place, the world is watching closely to see whether diplomacy can hold or if the crisis will spiral into conflict.